Welcome, everyone. Thanks for coming today to Building a Path to Positive Outcomes Through Student-Friendly Learning Targets. And this was a really fun one to put together because it's one of those things that sounds so simple, but when I really sat down to really think through all of the pieces that lead to learning targets and thinking about it in the context of out of school programs, it was a fun challenge to think of it in a different way. So I hope that it is helpful for you. And again, like I said, it's a small group. So as things come up, just interrupt me or throw something in the chat. I have it open on a screen here, so I'll be able to see it. But you know, Karen, and Karen just introduced me. So I'm really excited to be working with the DS team full time now and get to know all of the fun projects, especially the 21C group. So you've been through these a million times, so you know the general logistics. And Karen, the only thing I don't have is a link to the survey. So if you could send that to me, if you know where that is. I emailed Rebecca, but I haven't heard back yet. So today,
sorry, I'm on mute. I will do that. Okay. I'll do some recon.
My hope is that by the end of the session, you'll be able, these are your own ICANs, to say, I can explain why student-friendly learning targets have a strong impact on learning. I can write student-friendly learning targets to accompany program activities. I can break down complex tasks into clear language, building a path to success. I can link standards activities and student-friendly learning targets. And knowing that, I think, are you all directors in different? Yeah. So another, I might revise and be responsive with my ICANs and say, I might add, I can, teach staff and your colleagues in the program and model for them how to use ICANs in your own work, because that just fits your role in a better way. So the first thing I just want to think about is a time when you set a personal goal and had success. Thinking about what motivated you to set the goal. After you set the goal, did any elements shift? What kind of timeline or scope were you considering for the goal? What did you tell yourself would make it successful? What was the language you used with yourself? And all of those things. So I'm just going to give you a moment to think about that. You can just keep it in your mind, or you can jot it down on paper if that's helpful. So I'll just start. I'll start and give an example. So I find it easier, and maybe that's just the mindset I'm in right now. I find it easier sometimes to think about goals that I didn't reach and why. We're going to do that next. But for this one, for one where we had success, I think about, and this was a long time ago. This was pre-baby. Just deciding that I wanted to run a half marathon. Wasn't something that I had ever done before. And it didn't feel at first like it was an achievable goal, but once I found other people to do it with, and then, so I'm already thinking, okay, so this was a challenging goal. So I needed a group. I needed groupthink to break this down into doable tasks. And also people who had done it before. That was a helpful thing too. So talking through people who had done this before, figuring out the time between that day we decided to do it and the actual race day, thinking about, when would we need to start to increase our mileage, and, how would we deal with, weather and, on days where we were supposed to do long runs and things like that. And for, the language, really talking to myself in terms of, that positive talk. So using words with myself that told myself that I could, in fact, do this along the way, and not just do the thing, the half marathon, but each day along the way, that positive self-talk. Does anyone else have one you want to share, either in the chat or out loud? Yeah, go ahead, Emma. Thanks.
I'll go, just because it's actually very similar to yours. Last year, actually in 2021, when I moved up to New Hampshire, I decided I wanted to get into doing triathlons. And so and I'd never done them before. So October of 2021, I started weightlifting, had personal trainers, and I signed up for an Olympic triathlon, which is a mile swim, a 25-mile bike ride, and a 6-mile run. I've never run that much. I've never biked that much, but I was a competitive swimmer. So like that wasn't that bad for me. And I ended up doing 7 triathlons last year. And I had never done them before. And then this year I have my first triathlon coming up on May 6th. So for me, it was a lot of just getting in the mindset of working out. And also there's a whole big thing when you're training too, of looking at a scale. And when you're working out twice a day, training for these crazy races, the amount of muscle you build, and you're just like have to change your whole mindset about, body image, about eating, about exercising. And that was like, to me, like I was super happy with my progress. I might have been one of the last people to finish my race, my really big triathlon at the end of the season, but I finished. And I was so happy about that. My dad came to see. So definitely like seeing, like, I'd say this might sound terrible, like purchasing something and knowing I spent money on something is a motivator, because I signed up almost a year in advance for that race, knowing that I paid for it and I want to be able to do it so I don't waste my money.
I know, isn't it funny how money is a motivator like that? It's true, I think. It's very true. It definitely changes the way that it's not that you couldn't go about it and break it down into the steps and all of the different, angles that you just talked about, the mindset and diet and everything. But it just gives you that little push. Actually do it.
Totally. And then you start investing in, especially in like all these different kinds of race things, half marathons, all the different equipment, and you start getting super into that. And it's just, I have like my race bike sitting right here in my living room right now.
Well, and something else I hear you describing too was your level of engagement was really high, because at every turn you were really engaged with, like you just said, the equipment, or digging into what it meant for physicality or all different things. And so that's something really important to consider too. Thanks for sharing that, and congratulations.
Oh, thank you. I'm not in shape for this one coming up. It's going to be rough.
It'll be a good way to get in shape for your third one. And so sort of shifting this to thinking about a time when you were not successful. So if anyone has, any of those come to mind, feel free to share. I can give one really quick just to keep us going. I'm not a morning person, and at least once a year, I tell myself that's ridiculous and I should just get out of bed, and that, I should just get up and do yoga every morning, because every afternoon I want to do it and I'm too tired. And, I usually end up doing it anyway, but it, becomes a fight. And sometimes I say, you know what, forget it. I'm not a morning person. And I think really that, that never worked for me, because it did not fit. It did not fit who I was as a person. But it didn't mean it was completely impossible. So I had to shift that to fit more in a zone that fit me. And I shifted it to, okay, what if I did it 2 mornings a week? Just 2, that's not so bad. I can get out of bed early 2 mornings a week. And that worked for a while, and then it didn't. And then I recently started this again, and I had to even shift the goal down to 1. It's like, what if I just do it 1? And so shifting the goal so that I don't have this binary thinking. It's all or nothing. Oh, I didn't do it, so forget it. I'll never do it. But, starting to really shift it. Anybody else have a good one? I think it's okay if not. So I wanted to start thinking about this because sometimes when we're working with students, because of all the things that we're doing and we have in mind, it's hard to see things through student eyes. And sometimes to do that, we have to really, we have to go back to really our own process. And sometimes it's hard for us to remember how things were as kids. So starting with, how this applies to us as adults is a good place to go. And so I wanted to think about this so you could have this process in mind of all the things that it might take to reach a goal. Now, obviously, not every single task that you're doing in, an out of school program is gargantuan, but some things may last, a longer time. But the process would be the same, whether it was a long-term goal or a short-term goal, just for the session. So I'm just going to dig in for maybe 5 to 10 minutes on just sort of setting the stage for how we know that having clear language is helpful for us as learners. And so I pulled out some of the top impacts, influences on learning from John Hattie's research. And I'm sure this has come up. Karen, has this come up a lot for any 21C things?
Does what come up?
Just talking about the this research, the visible learning research.
I don't know that we've talked so much about John Hattie. Do you guys think we have? No, not so much.
Okay, so I mean, essentially, and actually, Karen, you gave such a good summary of how to look at this research yesterday on your webinar. I should have asked you to do that for me today. But since you're here, Karen, will you just give the example you gave yesterday of what an effect size means? So these listed here: feedback, teacher clarity, scaffolding, self-reported grades, and teacher estimates of achievement. We're going to dig into those in just a moment. These are some top influences on learning, and next to it is the effect size. And so that means the impact that it's going to have on growth. Karen, can you give the point 4 description of what it means at point 4?
Sure. So point 4 basically means that whatever that structure or strategy or input is, the meta study revealed that it will lead to approximately 1 year's growth at point 4. So that anything that's above point 4 leads to more than a year's growth, right? So if you look at self-reported grades, 1.33, that's gargantuan, right? So that's a huge positive intervention or pedagogical move, right? Teacher estimates of achievement, that's not a pedagogical move, right? That's a mindset. But he has divided his inputs into basically like instructional moves, homes, student mindsets, teacher mindsets. Yeah,
thanks, Karen. I appreciate it. That was really super clear. So I'm excited to learn more about that from you. But I always come back to, and he keeps expanding the research. And I just always get excited when there's a new graph out there that shows, because I think some of these are incredible. Just the thought that, these things right here, these things are free, right? Being able to give feedback and, learn how, to be super clear in your language and learn how to include students in goal setting and having them report back. These things are free. And so these are really, really strong impacts. They have a really strong impact on learning. And so we're not going to spend a ton of time on this, and you'll have the slides for reference. But thinking about this will all play into how you design your ICANs and how you use them. And so, thinking about the language that we're using, the feedback that's specific, it's timely, it's constructive, objective, respectful, and relevant, linked right to their goals. And not just the feedback, but the goals themselves. We make sure that we show clarity in our language, in our expectations. Sometimes like knowing the big picture, if you're doing something that's going to, last over a sequence of days, or it's a longer term goal. So these are some of the things that are helpful to keep in mind when we're designing and being responsive and tweaking our ICANs for activities, and thinking about how we give feedback to how students are meeting these goals. So self-reported assessment kind of looks like this. So say there's a group of 3rd to 5th graders, they're performing readers theater. And at the start of the session, the leaders might explain that by the end of today, they want to be able to say, I can follow along in the script while others are reading their lines. I can tell when it is my character's turn to speak by looking ahead to see who comes before me. Now, there are a lot of things that someone could say at the beginning of a reader's theater session with kids, but these would be based on knowing the students really well, to know the kinds of things that might be slightly challenging for them, just knowing the personality of the group or having done something like this with them before. And so where the self-reported assessment comes in is that we don't just hand these off to the students, we discuss these. We may even design the ICANNs together if we're basing it off. Maybe we got started yesterday and these were some of the things that we decided we needed to really focus on today. And so the discussion of understanding what these things are and students giving an example of when they've done it before, or if they feel they can do it, or asking for a model, like, what does that mean? Show me what that means to follow along, or listen for when it's my character's turn. So in this way, then, at the end of the session, they can self-assess in relation to this, to these statements. And so then at the end, you want to make these come full circle. So whether you designed them or you co-designed them with students, you want to revisit these at the end of the session so that students can reflect on how it went. And this helps students to express how it went for them, but it also gave them an anchor, because any task, especially if you have any kids that are distracted for any reason, which is pretty much all of them, right? It gives them an anchor. It gives them something that they can sort of hang on to. So teacher estimates of achievement might look like this. You learn what the children of the group need. Maybe teachers pass on to you that they need more practice with fluency and comprehension. And you know the students well enough that you think they would really love to put on skits, or they love to act things out. So I think a reader's theater is the way to go with this. And so maybe you gather input from others and you choose a script that's within their comfort zone, their ZPD, and we'll talk about that in a couple of slides. So within a comfort zone for them, which can be hard because you have a wide range of learners. So you're going to have to gauge which parts in the play will provide opportunity for success and growth for each child. And then you think through the plan, really taking into account any bias that might have crept into your choices, making sure to the best of your ability that this play will have an opportunity for growth and show students that you believe they can be successful with it. So I mentioned the ZPD, the zone of proximal development. And so this is really thinking about where is it that students can perform for a task, but they may need a little bit of help or pushing. It's not too easy for them. It's not too hard, right? It's the Goldilocks zone. It's just right. And so through support, whether it's through social interaction, feedback from the adults, they will be able to just be pushed outside of their comfort zone a little bit for growth. And so, I think about my example about, getting up early for yoga, waking up every single morning it's not in my ZPD. I actually don't think that it ever will be, but that's negative self-talk. But I did have to find my zone, and I did have to gauge where can I challenge myself just a little bit. And so when I picked 2 mornings, I picked it because I knew I could do 1, but could I do 2 was the question. And the great thing is that we know it's not fixed, and this will change as learners grow their skills. And so with help means scaffolding. So this is our scaffolded language that we are planning ahead. These are routines or supports we're giving students, and thinking about how we're focusing on ICANNs today. We can scaffold with the ICANNs. So if we know that if we had one day together with the reader's theater play or the math game, or whatever it may be, we know, okay, here's what went well today, here's what didn't, here are the supports that they're going to need tomorrow. And I may need to break this down more and provide some scaffolding. I love this imagery, right? So provide the little rungs that you can hang on to and get yourself up there. So that kids can be successful tomorrow. So for example, if a child was super successful today, they may be ready to transfer the knowledge to another context somehow. And so you may be thinking how they might be able to do that tomorrow. Or some weren't so successful and they need more practice. And so you break that task down even more. And I think of it with this visual, you're providing a rung where they need to be. And so the idea is that these fade over time. And so by using our clear student-friendly language, we provide the scaffolding. We write them as I cans because then you're personalizing it, saying, kids are putting it in their minds and in their bodies, saying they can do it. And then the confidence is what will allow those scaffolds to fade. And so I kind of talked through this process already, is that we're really thinking through what students already know and can do, and then trying to relate it to what they've done before, what they understand, what they've already shown that they can do. And now then this is where we need to decide what our goal is, and based on our knowledge of students, break it down into smaller, more manageable tasks with ICANNs. And some ICANNs will apply to all of the students, and some kids might, get some of their own personal ones. Depends on what the activity is. And then while you're doing the activity and after, this is where your scaffolding is during, but also there's feedback, and that feedback cycle, making it clear and making it relevant to what they're working on, is really going to help them grow. So I'm just going to pause there for a moment and just see if there's any thoughts, any wonderings, any questions. You can either put it in the chat or you can unmute. Up to you.
I love this and I appreciate it. I think it's a little difficult to do in after-school settings.
Mm-hmm.
We've done it sort of on a larger scale, like at the beginning of the year.
Yeah.
One of our site coordinators at the grade 3 to 5 sat down with kids and it was sort of more in a contract form.
Yeah.
Letting
Exactly.
them know that there would be more academics at 21C and that they would commit to that and that it would help them grow and improve in the classroom.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so thinking in terms of those, the ICANNs are actually, they're social emotional based, they're behavioral based, right? And so this same process can apply because something that's at least happened when I was teaching, and I was always guilty of this, is I would set learning contracts with students, and then I would set the expectations, we set the learning contract, and then it just became, you're either doing it or you're not. And I would remind students, like, remember we have a contract, remember we have a learning contract. And, we might meet, you have this idea that you'll be able to check in with students at the end of every day, right? It's just not realistic, especially in an after school program, right? There's so much going on. Kids leave at different times. And so, trying to think of, ways that, especially the kids that are going to need those check-ins, how we can schedule those, so that you can really help them build those behaviors. But I think, Susan, I'm glad you shared that, because that's a really good example. When I was envisioning this, I was trying to think about the wide range of things. The activity, you could be outside playing kickball, or you could be sitting at a small table, like doing something hard with math manipulatives. It's such a wide range.
Yeah, with a lack of, like today at one site, we have 8 staff. So I could sit down and do this with kids, but that's a rarity. My other question for you is, do you have any examples? I've been working a lot in K-2, and I'm still learning about K-2. And one of my big issues is being clear, because I tend to overuse vocabulary, or I either over explain or under explain.
Yeah.
And I think maybe using some of these ICANNs with them might be better approach.
Yeah, I do have some that I can dig some out for you, and I can send them your way. But what would be really helpful, Susan, if you can actually, hang on to that, because we're going to practice writing some in a moment, and I think that will be a good time to get started with it, and then we'll keep going. So hang on to that. Because I agree. I also, that is something that I always struggled with. You just feel like you want to give them all the information they could possibly need, but they're not going to receive it. They're just not. I find that to be really, really hard sometimes too. So here's some examples. I think these are like grade 3. These are some grade 3 and 4 examples, I believe. And I even, for me, I feel like these would be example I can statements to start, but I even would simplify some of these. And so these might be, some that I have to start with, but I might shift them a little bit based on the students in my group. For example, if I have a number of English learners in my group, some of these words aren't going to fly. The word illustration might not fly, sequence might not fly. And so I really have to think about the kids in my group, even though, say I reached out to the 3rd grade teacher and said, hey, I know you want me to, work on these particular skills with them. And a lot of teachers do have these already written. Might be something interesting to ask, when teachers pass things on to you that they want you to be doing with students, to see if they have some ICANNs. But you really do need to personalize them for students. So for example, the I can describe characters in a story in multiple ways. I might even think, okay, multiple ways might trip up some kids. I might think, okay, describe characters. So I might think about like starting with myself first, like I can tell my friend 3 things about myself, or I can tell you 2 things about this, and name the character in the story, about Rosa in the story, really making it super explicit and specific to that situation, if that makes sense. And here were some math ones, and the same thing. Some are pretty straightforward. I can use what I know about multiplication to solve a word problem. And then some are much more complex and would probably need broken down even further, depending on the age and the language abilities of the students you're working with. So I'm coming back to the Reader's Theater example. And so I'm just imagining if I was doing this at an after school session, kids, there were kids who wanted to sign up for this. And so I know who's signed up for it. I know who's coming. And so my initial goal is what we want to be able to do by the, say we're doing this for the week. I might say, okay, I can read and perform a play with my group. That's what I want everyone to be able to say. So I just want to give you a moment to either, in the chat, or just if you're writing it down, or if you have a good memory, keeping it in your mind, just think of a familiar group of students that you've worked with, and think, if this were the learning target, I can read and perform a play with my group, what would they need to do? And this would probably be different for each of you based on the kids you're thinking of. So I'll give you a minute to think about that. All right, does anyone have a group of kids in mind, or an idea, thinking of those kids, thinking, okay, here are the things they would need to be able to do to succeed, things I'll need to support them on, mini goals to reach?
For my group of K-2s, they would need practice projecting their voice. They are very loud children until they have to talk to the group, and then all of a sudden they whisper. They would need practice reading aloud and reading in front of the group. Yes, Karen. Yeah, I'm actually writing I can statement for today's lesson. I'm going to try it today.
Yeah, so I just typed in the chat, just like based on the things you said, like my first thoughts. Because the thing is if these were the first things, and Susan, these are great examples. If these are the first things that you need to do, you may not even be reading the play yet, right? You might not even be digging into the script yet. Because if you know that these 2 things are going to be first, then you may play a different kind of game or do a different kind of activity where kids are practicing these 2 things, so that at the end you can link this to say, well, tomorrow we're going to look at our script And when you find out who your part is, then you can revisit those. Thanks, Karen. So here's some that I wrote with a group of kids in mind. You know, I can find my lines. I think, you know, early literacy, being able to, okay, my name's Patrick in the play. Like, how do I find Patrick? Spending some time with a partner. I'm going to go find it. Maybe I'll even highlight it. You know, for students that tend to get, you know, distracted or lost, you know, when they're reading and have a really hard time sort of capturing the full, you know, gist of the story. Maybe even saying, I can make a picture in my mind while everyone reads their parts. For students who, you know, I mean, they're ready, like they're ready to read their part, and then they get so excited and they're watching this happen and this and whatever. It's their turn, and they're all like, everyone's like, you know, Sarah, it's your turn, Sarah. So, you know, some kids, and you know, sometimes laying these out ahead of time based on what you know of the kids, you know, you can even have kids pick which one of these feels like something you might need. And then it really links to what the kids feel they need. And then that links back to that, you know, self-reported grades. Teachers or kids are owning their goal. I think about, you know, the fluency with punctuation, and really trying to, you know, this is really knowing your character. So helping to use your voice to show the punctuation. And the way to be responsive is revising them as needed. The ultimate goal hasn't changed. You know, just like if you were starting with a standard, like the standard doesn't change, but the way you've broken it down and the way you've designed these, you've invited students into saying, I can do this, or by the end of the session, I will be able to do this. Then you're able to be responsive to each student. All right, so we're going to practice a little bit. So hopefully you have something that you're doing today or soon, or just something in mind that's been hard. So like, you know, Susan, you said K-2 things have been challenging. So, you know, think of an activity or lesson that you plan to do soon, and then just start with writing a general I can statement that matches the ultimate goal of the activity. We're not even going to worry about standards yet. Or at all, but we will talk about that at the end. But right now, knowing what you want to do with students. And then we're going to break it down. So if you, oh, did I give you the link to the slides? I don't think I did. Let me just put the link to this in the chat for you.
Guys, just in case you missed it, I popped a survey in there. I don't know if you guys saw it, but at the beginning, after Jacqueline and I discussed it. So the survey's in there also at the top.
All right. So while you're thinking of that, I'm just going to pull up, I thought I linked this Padlet. I did not. So I'm going to pull it up because I want us to be able to, if you can, to type it on there so we can all see each other's examples. Here we go. I'm going to make sure you can write on it. You can. We're good to go. All right, so I put the link to the Padlet in the chat. I'm going to bring the slides back so you have the directions. And I'll give you a couple of minutes to add your thinking on there. Come back. Karen, I see you smiling, so I know you're playing along. And as you're thinking of your ultimate goal, think about how you might need to break it down. Think about what's going to need to happen first. Are there words that kids will need to know? Are there things they might need to practice, if they're working with a partner or a group? Ooh, I love that Padlet shows me thinking dots now, so I can see when you're typing, just like in the chat. That's so interesting.
Jacqueline, can I use my own children?
What's that?
Can I use my own children?
Absolutely.
Just so you know, I'm new to Padlet, so I'm having trouble figuring this out.
Okay, do you see, you can kind of double click on the screen anywhere to
So
post?
it looks like I've put mine on twice, but I don't see anything from anybody else.
I'm working on it.
Yeah, Karen's still typing, so you are in good shape.
I pressed the little purple like plus
Yep.
button. So maybe I'm just doing a little too much here because I'm like typing a thing versus putting.
No, you're fine.
Okay.
You're fine. Because it won't show up until you sort of post the sticky.
Okay, this is sort of funny. I mean, this is not.
Oh my gosh, Karen, you're hilarious. I love it.
Sorry, I was trying to think of kids that I've worked with lately.
Mhm.
I'm sorry, I should have put it in the context of after school. I'm really
No,
I'm really
that's a-
self-centered.
it's okay, because I think that it's, like I said at the beginning, it is sometimes really important to think about how we do this. Like we do this for ourselves. And so, but we know how to do it. Or, just because we know how to do it doesn't mean we actually do it, but we do have the capacity to do it. And so sort of building that capacity in students, is one of those things that, eventually that will fade. Students will begin to internalize what it means to express a goal.
This feels a little like backward planning.
Mhm.
Like, you know what I mean? Like you have your big goal, which is not supposed to be big, right? But it's, so then you have your micro steps.
Exactly.
I like the idea. So we usually set up a big whiteboard with the activities of the day.
Yep.
So I'm thinking I might try listing the activity and then putting one or two I can statements underneath it. And if we did that every day, I wonder if the kids would soon start using those internally. It might be a lot for little kids, but.
Yeah, and I think those who don't start to do it automatically for themselves, it becomes one of those expected things. So it becomes sort of like a comfort in the lesson. So when kids are used to seeing the schedule and the board, right? And so that's something they're used to. And it's like if the board is blank, they're like, oh my gosh, what are we doing today? They feel like the world is ending. And then slowly adding those in there is going to feel like a comfort support too. Like, what's that activity? I don't know what that is. Oh, I can, I can play tag with gentle hands. Great. Okay, I understand what we're doing today, kind of thing. All right, okay, great. So we have some example. This is great. Nice. Okay, the kindness club, I'm looking at these. Yeah, breaking this down into, and what I see here with the kindness club is like breaking it down into what does kindness mean?
Mm.
Because that's like, I'm gonna be kind to students every day, or I'm gonna be kind to my friends every day. Well, what does that even mean? And I think, and not just, meaning in terms of like, I'm acquiring English and that's a new word for me, but really, for any child, what does it look like and feel like and sound like to be kind?
It's the most wholesome club. These
So
a
cute.
fourth grader started it last year
Aw.
and with a couple of his friends, and he has since this is going to be the fourth time he's had kindness that I've let him run kindness club. We have adults and everything there, but like he has typed up a whole like a lesson plan. Like he shares it with me in Google Docs, and there's a spreadsheet with like schedules of what they're going to do each day, like timing of things, supplies they need. And like I always tell my students, I'm like, if there's a club that you want to host, like this is what you have to send me a proposal. Like, you have to plan for at least 7 or 8 days. I need a timeline of what you're going to do within that hour. What supplies are you going to do? Like lesson plan, like this whole thing. And some kids will go so hard with this because they want to do a club. And I'm like, I'm not approving anything until I have a lesson plan. And some kids will start planning and then it kind of dies off because they're like, this is a lot of work to do a club.
Right.
But this one kid, he will sit there during his recess time and just type away doing this lesson plan. And it is so cute.
Emma, I'm happy it's a boy.
Yeah, it is.
I know that sounds ridiculous, but I have found in most of those types of situations, even in adulthood, oftentimes those activities and things are pioneered by girls.
And
Mhm.
this boy, he is quite possibly the nicest child I've ever met. And even his parents have said, because I've like dog sat for them, very close with the family. He has a younger sister who is very outspoken and has quite a personality. I'll say very opposite of her 5th grade brother. And they're just like, he is so innocent. He is so loving. He just loves everybody, loves school, loves his teachers, and has the kindest heart. And I'm like, there is no other person I'd want to run kindness club
Yeah.
than this child.
I'm getting anxious though. I feel like he's going to get clocked. Yeah. By his peers, but I'm really, yeah. Okay. Anyway, off topic.
They help though. They help. He has friends that help him. So
Just for those who are going to watch the recording, I'm going to shift over. Can you see my Padlet now on the screen? On
We
the
see
share
that.
screen?
Am I
Okay.
seeing Padlet actually?
Yeah, just because I know some will
Yes,
watch in the
Padlet.
recording. So here's an example of kind of what some of us were exploring, really breaking down the steps, or at least getting started writing overall goals. I think about this tag one, that might even be more of like a sub I can. I think, a general I can might be, I can have a good time playing tag with my friends and like talk about what it feels like to have a good time. Well, when we have a good time, when we play tag, we're laughing and, people aren't shoving each other over or being too rough or whatever, that kind of thing. Just trying to think of a good after school example. And Susan, I like your idea of adding, the I can. It's hard to work this in, like you're saying, in this setting, but finding the ways that you can work it in. And then as students latch on to different pieces and just finding those little pockets you can move into in the rhythm of, doing your activities where these fit or where they work well.
can I add something to
Please.
this?
Mhm.
So I know a lot of these things are focused on, I'll say like lesson goals, but
Mhm.
something that I kind of see left out here that I think works really well too is just going to be if there's behavior plans in place. So whenever I have conversations about behavior and saying like, this is what you did, what can you do next time? And the kids will be like, I can walk away. I can go tell a teacher. And so I know when I have these conversations with kids, I do end up I do this of like the I can, but I think behavior wise, if there's something that maybe they're not doing or they're doing, I think that incorporating these into there and having into that conversation and having the kids come up with them is super helpful, because it also holds them accountable, because they're the ones creating that goal. You're saying that you can do this.
Mhm.
Show me you can do this next time you're in that situation, so we don't have a repeat of what just happened.
Right. And this is a great example, because then, maybe they get picked up and they leave, and the next day you check in with them like, hey, how are you feeling? Like, how's it going after yesterday? And then just a reminder of that, so that they can say it. And then if and when they do it, there's the time for that feedback. It's not, and that's where like the specificity and feedback will come in. It's not just like someone says like, oh, I can't, like, they walked away or whatever it is, like, oh, good job. It's very specific. It's like, I noticed today you walked away. Yesterday you didn't walk away. And just showing that growth. And sometimes it feels like overkill in language, but sometimes they need to hear the comparison. Yeah, I think behavior is it's a huge opportunity for these, because
Especially
it's
now. I don't know if it's definitely not just my kids.
No.
But the 100 kids I have, it has been just nuts. And we're on spring break next week, so it's 10 times worse than usual. But especially between now and the end of the school year, I just know these behaviors are going to be popping up, and we have a very strict disciplinary policy in my program, and you get 3 strikes for things like, inappropriate language, inappropriate behavior. You could probably guess all the things that kids can earn these strikes for. And we've had 3 kids this year who have earned those 3 strikes and been suspended. We had one student come back, and he has been fantastic since he's come back. We've set goals in place for him in terms of homework, behavior. And since he's come back, it's been a huge change, and he's been fantastic. So I definitely think these I can statements work wonders and for behaviors, because I've seen it. It's really only been this one kid, but that's the other 2, not so much, hasn't worked so much with them, but it does work for some kids.
Well, yeah, I mean, they have to get, for the other 2, they still may be stuck in the binary. Like, I can behave, I can't be, like, I'm going to choose to behave, I'm not going to choose to behave. It's too big. It's like, I'm going to wake up every single morning early. Well, that is way too big. It's not that black and white. Yep. It's, those very specifics, like you were saying, the goal setting. So one of the things that, is really helpful is you read ICANNs out loud and read them like through the ears of your kids. We talk about trying to see things through the eyes of our kids, but sometimes you can sort of read them and sort of hear them the way your kids might hear them. And sometimes you need to revise them on the spot, because kids are confused, and then, they'll let you know. And so, this is all very fluid. All right, back over here. There we go. So, thinking about if you are planning something that is academic, if you're planning something, you're working in particular with a small group, there's tutoring, or I know every school has a wide range of what happens in the out of school time. And so, sometimes you think like, which comes first? Like, do I look for the standard, or do I write an ICANN, or, do I design something based on their interest, or do I design it on their need? And, there is no real answer. It really comes down to what is going to set you up for the most success? What's the most realistic for your situation? If finding the specific matching standard isn't necessary, you may not need to do that. But if you have been tasked with working off of a specific standard, you can do that. You can write the ICANNs first and find the matching standard. Or if someone says, here are the standards that they're struggling with, then you can maybe craft some ICANNs from that and get the idea of what the activity would be. And so I say the same thing with interest and need. I mean, I pretty much always start with interest based on a need, but I just wanted to lay these out, because these are sometimes the things that go through our mind when we're planning. So way back when we first were talking about teacher estimates of achievement, when we're looking at what we want, let's say we are starting with standards. I've seen the planning template, and I know that there are sometimes and in some sites, there are standards or focus standards for the week or something like that in certain groups. And so one of the things that will really help that, help keep kids at the center with those is making sure that you're keeping those particular kids in mind when you pick the I cans. Now, I think that goes without saying, especially in an out of school setting, because that's what you're doing. That's what you're doing every day. But, just keeping in mind that when you're trying to choose what it is that you want to do in that week, you want to base it off of the belief that, the kids can success, that you can push them a little bit in their zone of proximal development, and try. And maybe sometimes you pick something that's too hard or too easy, and that's fine because, either way, you're estimating what you think they can achieve based on your knowledge of those children and your relationships with them. So we just have a few minutes, but I want to just show you how, if you had to, and I'm going to minimize out of here so I can click on my link here. So I wrote these ICANs earlier to go with the Reader's Theater, but maybe I do need to match them to standards. So here's just, I don't know if you can see this, how big this is. Whoops, wrong one. There we go. So I'm looking in here and I'm thinking like, this is like, who has time for this, right? I'm planning for after school, but let's just say that you had to. And so I might think, okay, I'm doing this Reader's Theater, and here are some of the things I know kids are going to need. And we'll just take a minute too. If you all can read this, can you find a standard on here that matches some of the things we talked about with the Reader's Theater, with, keeping track of where we are for our lines, or paying attention while others are speaking, using our punctuation. Does anyone see one that might match? And feel free to just look in one grade column, since we only have a minute left.
The vocabulary?
Say more about that.
Determine the meaning of words and phrases as they are used in a text. Grade 5, under craft and structure.
Yeah, I agree, because you may know that, maybe there are students that are ready to be pushed a little bit to learn some new vocabulary. And so you extract that vocabulary from the play and dig into that a little bit, so that they're able to comprehend what they're reading as they move through. My eyes really go to number 5 in craft and structure. Refer to parts of stories, dramas, poems, et cetera, using terms like chapter, scene, stanza, that one, so that you can work with students to say, okay, we're going to scene 3. And kids know that you're saying scene, S-C-E-N-E, and you're not saying scene, S-C-E-N, and they know what scene means. Just another one that popped into mind. All right, well, there's just a couple more in here, but for time's sake, I'll shift back to the slide, but I just kind of wanted to talk through that in case it was something you had to do. And thinking through the other way. Oops. And, let's say you were given the standards and you're reading through them, then you can think back and say, okay, so if this is the standard, really thinking through what a particular standard means and trying to visualize what that would look like for the children you're working with. And then find, an activity will pop into mind. You'll say, oh, this is just like when we, fill in the blank. Or I've always wanted to try this, this with students. This might be a good time. And then you can start to use this. I mean, this language is not student friendly, but you can use that to extract the I cans from the standards that you've been given. So just to kind of pull this all together, you know, thinking about making the ICANNs full circle is what creates the impact. So if we just, you know, share them with students and we don't revisit them at the end, or revisit them, you know, throughout the week or throughout like the behavior plan, like that example, then it's not going to have the effect. It's just going to become more noise, you know, on the board, or more noise coming from teachers or from the leaders. And so keeping in mind that these are full circle, they become a part of life, is the way to help them achieve that impact on students and how they're, you know, how they're being successful in the programs. So thank you for coming today. It was nice to have a little group.